and on.
So
Well, it says it's recording, but it didn't announce it. That's strange.
it did on mine.
Oh,
It
it
did
did?
on
Okay.
mine, man.
Okay. That's
Yeah,
why. I guess it doesn't bother to tell the host. That's fine.
yeah.
So
Somehow you possibly don't need to know those sort of things.
apparently, it's just do your job, mind your own business.
Yeah. Plus, it's disappeared.
Hmm.
So I might throw you on the computer then.
Okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
All right. So we are here as part of our men's group. Mark was called into a conference and he asked me to pull this together. So here we go. So I have no set agenda. I thought maybe we would go a little bit. We were talking on one of the other shows a bit about for men being able to get out of their head and into their heart. So I thought maybe we'd do a little bit around that. Um, and then the other thing that came, whoops, oh, that's you again. Okay. The other thing that came up was how to work effectively with women in these crazy times. So does anyone want to grab either one of those and share some thoughts, or shall I?
So what was the second bit you mentioned? I missed that while I was switching from my phone.
The second one was how can men more effectively work with women in these times of change so we have a better balance?
Oh, my
Well, I
first,
think, yeah, go ahead.
And I think that's the thing about a lot of men we are clueless because our approach, or at least my approach, is a lot different. And I don't know. So I have a couple women in my life right now. They're pretty strong personalities, and I just find myself
Hmm.
bowing their will in most cases.
Interesting. Yeah, and I guess that happens. Though I haven't seen as many men in these circles lately, and we need more of us to step up for sure. I guess I've always worked really well with women. Actually, I generally work better with women than men. Partly because I've done a lot of nonprofit work, so there's a lot more women in that anyway. But for me, a big part of it is that other question, okay, how do we go from our head into our heart? The men tend to work up here most, and the women work more from here. So maybe balancing those two helps, I don't know, come together. Chris, what do you think? You work with a lot of women too. Whoops, sorry, I didn't mean to catch you eating.
it's I go along with what you say. Coming from our feelings makes a big difference. But the other side, to find out how to do it, I learned one thing: ask the women.
Good point.
Don't come up with our stuff because it's a man's version of it.
Hmm.
And women, most of the time, will just laugh at that.
Hmm.
You know, we love acting like we know what we're doing. It's like in the US at the moment, men think they know what to do with women's bodies or what should happen. Yeah, good luck with that one. That's the one where you'll find yourself outside the car standing on the street corner while it's raining. Yeah, no, I come back
Good.
to ask the women every time.
Okay. So, Mark, if um, you defer to your lady's opinion a lot, is that effective, or for both of you, or for you, or how's that work?
Well, it always, it depends on who the personality is.
Hmm.
One of the individuals I'm speaking of, she just simply won't admit a mistake. I've never had her very truly apologize to anything for her. So that's the way the relationship works. Is that
Hmm.
um, she truly is one of these individuals. So it has to deal with dealing with a healthy woman too in terms of the way they
Hmm.
filter and play as well. And so when you're dealing, for me to deal with this personality, which is they will not admit to a mistake they don't make an apology for anything. So you just kind of have to just find a, place that you can, least resistance. And, what that's different personality. Um, I don't know, there's no way I've been doing with lately. She seems to be a lot more forward and open, but at the same time, what I find is interesting in my relationships with women is that they present a different front depending on who they're talking to. And, and I find that one of the most disingenuous things that I have had in relationship with women, and some in particular, is that you can have a conversation with them and then they'll kind of a little bit fair weather in that they'll basically take different sides of the situation, particularly in some business cases where there's a different thought of how to do things. Which they placate both parties. It's an issue I've had with someone that I work with. If you had to work, you understand what I'm saying, she'll agree, and then she'll talk to the other person, and so she's kind of like doesn't keep her mouth shut. Um, what you say to her is not confidential.
Hmm.
And
Hmm. Yeah,
I'd
that's
agree.
good.
I was going to say I'd agree with that one.
Yeah,
Women talk a lot more, so there's nothing confidential.
no. Oh no. Oh, no, I think we've all learned that early on.
I mean, us guys, we have a sense of what we say among each other is stays between us, and if you feel like it's important for us to share that with another person,
Yep.
we'll ask the person that's confidential. Well, ask one of you if I had something you and I can talk about confidentially. I would before I would say something, but I think there's just there's a code among men. I think at least that's the way I see to operate with it, and I'm working with the ground associate.
Yeah. Hmm. I think the point I got as you were speaking a few minutes ago too is, of course, every situation is unique. So we can't, it's no one size fits all. But I think in groups, it's the group dynamic that maybe is um, more important, and recognizing that, yeah, men and women communicate very differently.
Mm. It's basically a different language.
Yeah. Yeah, it
And
is.
other thing too is that in a business situation, depending on how
Right.
close the way it works as a group, I think I've also dealt with that men tend to be more business-like, whereas women bring in the emotions into things like that. Um, in terms of the environment, it's kind of like we all got to be friends, where men are just a little bit more matter of fact and getting the job done.
Mm.
They're not as bringing other people's feelings into the equation. That's another experience I've had, and that's been probably that's maybe my personality, which I'm pretty matter of fact, and I'm not weighing how other people feel about, particularly the women feel about a certain situation.
Ah, okay.
Whereas women will tend to discuss it amongst themselves first, make sure everybody's on board.
Right.
And the thing I find, a big part of going from the head to the heart, it's always how does it feel? Yeah, I can come up with a theory, I can come up with the words,
Uh-huh.
I can come up with all sorts of concepts, but if it doesn't feel right, let it go.
Yes.
Because that's sort of more the instinctive, intuitive, which is associated and connected with the feminine side of things.
Yep. All right. So huh, we agree there's differences in how we communicate, and even differences in different women and or different men. How
Mm.
do we use that as a positive to more effectively work, communicate, understand?
Well, I find that, the best thing you can do, because I will in business, I do coaching, career coaching. And so my approach with everyone who first talked to them, what I call client call, figure out, what it is, the needs are, what's going on within their job search and the career success. It's to ask the right questions and then listen what they talk.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so we have to pay attention to the other genders. Um,
Well, that's just with anyone, but I think particularly when
yeah.
to
Oh, yeah.
ask the right questions and then listen.
Yeah. No, I think
It's,
that's, go ahead, Chris.
yeah, I was going to say, just reflecting on how often I do it, often with a conversation, I'll wait till I get a feeling of where everybody's at. And I notice if I tend to start coming from an analytical thing, I'm spotting it a lot earlier nowadays, and I tend to hold back
Hmm.
because I know analysis isn't always right and doesn't give me an accurate perspective where the other person's at. Um,
Yeah.
it's just what my own brain is processing. To tell where the other person's at, I've really got to sit down and just, okay, where's everybody at? What's going on here? What's the dynamics?
Hmm.
Who's listening? Who's talking? And I watch because even with myself, if I'm talking, it often means I'm not listening. Whereas
Yep.
if I'm listening, I don't need to talk because the information's still coming in. Um, very fine balance between listening and talking.
Yeah, and that's interesting because we tend to go back to our defaults gender wise. You just did it right there, Chris. That's why I was chuckling. And
Mm,
partly then we have to maybe pay attention to that. You just said when they're talking, I go into my head and I'm analyzing what they're saying. So you go right into your masculine energy if you're doing that. But
yeah,
I find for me, when I'm talking with women, either individually or as a group, I I do that other part, which isn't always easy. I get out of here and I get into my heart, and I want to see what I'm feeling as we talk. So
yeah,
hopefully, I'm a little more in line with how they're communicating. And when it really works well, that means that they're doing the same, and they're bringing in a little more of a mental approach. So
yeah.
it can work, but it's not. It just doesn't happen. I don't think.
No, but that's what we're getting pushed towards, when we talk about sort of re-looking at the world anew and developing a new way.
Hmm.
It's coming from that feeling perspective. So now analysis is what's destroyed the environment and caused so many, environmental, social, political problems. Whereas when you feel you know whether something's right or not, we may not know why, but we know something is right or it just doesn't feel right.
Hmm.
And that's a huge thing to listen to.
Yep. Hmm.
And to me, that's, you know, women already start from that place, whereas we sort of cross check it somewhere along the line.
Hmm.
But the
Hmm.
more we come from it, which is part of what you and I've been learning lately, Jim, it's how does it feel?
Hmm.
It's been a huge part of what we've been doing. Get to the intersection. Do we turn left or do we turn right?
Hmm.
No plan, no understanding, but just following that intuition,
Hmm.
which is a language in itself.
That's true.
Mm.
Anything, Mark?
I'm just I'm just listening, and
Good.
of course, I haven't been participating in meetings, so I'm a little bit out of context. What we're doing or
Mm,
talking about. This is like, okay, here's the top we're talking about, so I just don't have the context of what the group is talking
mhm,
about in process before. So
mhm.
that's what it is, and the feelings work is an interesting thing. I mean, it's I think you have to find a balance between it because I think you can also
Yes.
just much and try to be feeling kind of childlike type of a person instead of an adult.
Mhm.
And I see a lot of people that get into this work, they shift into a totally feelings model. And I think part of, your wisdom in being an adult and how to navigate life is to, you can be able to just to filter when it is and when it isn't, the right time to be in your feelings. You kind of does that make sense to you? Because otherwise,
Yeah.
it's a rather naive approach to life. It's my personal opinion. Is to try to approach everything from being feelings all the time. You know,
Um,
and so, and of course, your feelings is always based on your references and the information and the environment you're coming from. And so, as they always say, in some circumstances, feelings aren't facts. So, that's the whole thing about all this work. I mean, there's so many layers and so many wrinkles
Oh
to this
yeah.
whole thing. It's like, you know, and I guess that's probably why it's good to talk about this stuff and see how other people handle situations. And
Mhm.
it's good to share that. And this is the appropriate place to do that,
Yeah.
right? So, anyway.
No, I think that's
Yeah.
good. I think though, I think balance is the big thing. You're right. Because if it's on the other side, if we go too much from the head, we're in a place of the brain, its primary function is to keep us safe. So we don't take any kind of chances often if we just are in the brain. Where if we tap into our emotions, that's a little clearer reading on what we're feeling. But you're also right. If we just go with the emotions, then we're kind of floating out there uh, with maybe an emotional um, anchor, but no structure around it at all.
Let
So
me give
yeah,
you an example of something that's going on in my life right now.
yeah,
Okay. Where
hmm
feelings are definitely coming up. Right. So last month I was in the hospital and I've been diagnosed with a heart condition, heart failure. So
hmm
my heart is not functioning at, full speed.
hmm
And so one of the things is that um, what that's led to is I have to totally change my diet.
yeah,
Okay. And sticking to the diet and sticking to the lifestyle and making that total adjustment is really, really difficult because guess what? I have always eaten or ate to mask my feelings. So
yeah,
being in this type
yeah,
of situation, right, where my life depends on changing my diet, the quality of my life, and really the longevity of my life at this point in time
hmm
depends on me changing this diet and making this it has to be a really hardcore change, right? Because even the dietitian from the hospital, I recognized the diet that they gave me wasn't optimal. And so I've even ramped it up to a level of, being a lot tighter and restricted to
hmm
a diet that I have found that will give me the best chance to recover or have extend my life, which is raw fruits and vegetables. And that's a huge dramatic shift
oh yeah,
from any type of regular diet.
yep,
Okay. And so that's the struggle I'm in now. And of course, I've never really been successful at keeping my weight off, which is why I'm in the situation I'm in. But
Mhm.
it's this real struggle because the feelings are coming up because I've always used, and then there's a lot of challenges right now. My medical bills are astronomical. Business is bad. So there's a lot of stress going on
Yep,
besides this health standpoint. and therefore there's a lot of discomfort, a lot of uncomfortable sitting through things and
Hmm.
going through a situation and taking the time to build something because then my business is not doing well. And so that's requiring a lot of effort, not seeing the results yet. So a lot of
Right.
frustration, just a lot of feelings. So that's where, you know, at some point in time is that if I feel my feelings and it's really good to feel them, but it also at the same time, the other struggle I have is not letting me go into depression and just totally just go into the corner with them. So
Yeah, and that's another good point. When I feel that way, and I can sometimes use food also as um, comfort when things get too stressful. I don't drink, I don't do drugs, so I can use food, or I do too much. I get too active. But for me, when that happens, I have to go into my emotions to look at it if I'm going to try to balance it better. Because when I go into my head, uh-oh, there you go. Chris is this little skinny guy. It's all right. He can drink, he can eat chocolate. So if I go into my
that's
head,
cruel. That's absolutely cruel.
and it was cruel, wasn't it? And see, there's something else men do.
Yeah, a woman, if you did that to a woman, it'd be like, oh God, you're being so insensitive, right? Oh my gosh.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Ever she just had this emotional outpouring of, what's going on with her and shared her here, and you just come and make a joke about it.
Uh, yep,
Yeah.
As those guys can laugh about it. I mean, that's a big difference right there.
yes. Uh-huh.
Huge.
Yep.
There's one thing that's coming to mind for me that
Hmm.
I find important: the difference between feelings and emotions. And I'm going to get a little bit technical now. To
Uh-oh.
me, feelings are in the moment. Emotions, we have two sorts of emotions. We have the emotions that happen in time, which is where we think and analyze. Feelings we feel in the moment. So there's the world of the moment and there's the world of time. We have emotions which are reactive emotions that happen in time, but we have emotions that happen in the moment, which are an extension of what we're feeling. Emotions that happen in time, I find, tend to be divisive and separating. Emotions that happen in the moment tend to be connecting and more harmonizing.
Hmm.
So just throwing that out there.
Hmm. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. Same thing, maybe, yeah, same thing when I use my mind too much. Sometimes things that come quickly into my mind, and if I act on them too quickly, um, are negative or destructive. If I have time to sit back and think and let it be in there a little bit, often my
Yeah,
response is more positive. So yeah, likewise with the emotions. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
And an extension from that,
Hmm.
the way as men we've done it, we've planned and thought and used our brains first. Somewhere along the line, we may or may not reference a feeling. Most of the time, we haven't.
Hmm.
If we think it's right, we're willing to go with that, even if it's a load of garbage.
Yep.
Whereas women will feel something out and then they'll go to the brain, how do I do that? Like,
Hmm.
I've got to go to the supermarket, whatever. But then they'll plan, okay, I need to go here. It's rush hour traffic, so I better take that route. They use the brain last. Whereas as men, we've used our brains first.
Hmm.
We're not, to me, it's not one or the other, it's the order in which we use them. The brain that operates in time cannot lead because it's always operating in the past.
Hmm.
That's one of the issues with working in time. Whereas feelings being in the moment, they're leading. They're the thing we have first.
Hmm.
Then those signals are sent from the moment to the brain. So learning to be in the moment is crucial for that lead part of us, that intuitive part of us that does give us a lot of information, but we don't access when we use the brain first.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah, just throwing that in there.
and I do. I work from emotions first because I can be too reactionary. I can be too male if I go right into the brain. And
Mm,
sometimes we need to. Sometimes we need a quick decision. There's a saber-toothed tiger running down at us from above. We better be in the brain, or we're going to be lunch. Other
yeah,
times, however, there's plenty of time to think about it, and then I go in first and see how do I feel about this? How do I feel about the person telling me is part of it, and then I'll go into my brain. So I guess, yeah, once again, it's balance and when to use it. I'm trying to see how this would help us in a group, a mixed group of men and women, because that's what we need to do right now. I mean, we've got to come together more effectively than we have. Otherwise, we waste half our time arguing with each other. And that's not just men and
yeah,
women, that's a bunch of different groups. But men and women's a good one to look at because there's roughly half the population in each.
yeah. And how much do we actually support each other, encourage, and help each other through a situation? Men, I feel we tend to do it individually, even though we might be, oh yeah, we're a group working on this job, building a house or something. Um, but we tend to still think of ourselves as an isolated individual within the group.
Hmm.
Whereas in feelings, tend to feel that sense of empathy and connection that we have a lot more available
Hmm.
in those emotional, in the moment spaces. Now, a funny example I have with it, how much do we back each other up? If you're in a social gathering, equal amounts of men and women, and a woman says to her partner, does this make my ass look fat? I can guarantee you all men will go away from the poor sod who's just been asked. They don't want to be involved in answering this question because they know there's a no-win scenario going on,
Hmm.
you know. And that's that thing. We sort of isolate and separate to preserve
Hmm.
rather than coming together as a collective, uniting and supporting each other cooperatively, which is what I see we're being pointed towards nowadays. You know, we're not a community of individuals, we're a community that is self supporting and nurturing each other. Any moment that nurturing is not happening and support is not happening,
Hmm.
that group, that community is no longer a community that is fragmented. Going into the brain separates automatically, and community is lost at that moment. So, yeah, more random thoughts.
Random thoughts are good.
Mm, mm,
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to shift back then to this mind versus heart. And how do we effectively go from one to the other? And I'm telling you, it's not, at least for me, it's not easy. And most people I work with, especially men, say it's not easy. We had a group going on the other day, and we had three men in the group, and myself, so we're four. And the other three are all saying, I don't know how to get into my heart. It's just so hard. I get stuck in my brain. And I think that's because then it's being looked at as an either or scenario. For me, the big thing between getting out of your head and into your heart, or vice versa, is right here. It's in the throat. Because if it's not working, the block is usually here, which tells me we have to speak more. We have to talk about, okay, how do I do that? How do I how do I share this with you so you can receive it if you're another person of another gender? And often we don't do that, and that will stop us. That'll stop us from getting out of our head. I know it did for me for years. My head and my heart were fighting wars together. And it made it really, I couldn't communicate what I wanted to, and I really couldn't communicate with the groups I was working with. until I decided that, okay, I have to remove that block. I have to say what I have to say respectfully and not to cause any discomfort, but not to keep it bottled in. And that lets you get a little bit out of the head. Because like someone said earlier, yeah, the women will talk a lot more than the men. I've had things, I've shared something with a woman, and a few days later, I'll have 10 other women friends come back to tell me what I had shared. And I'm going, what? Well, wait, I sat with what's her name and we shared this together. And the man just generally won't do that. And
Yeah,
it's not a comfortable place to be because it can be very personal stuff that comes back.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's particularly bad when you have a conversation. And in this case, you're sharing some frustrations of dealing with another person, and then that person goes and shares your conversation, and then you
Yep.
get that.
Yep.
And and it's meant to be. It's not that, and I have a certain that situation come up this, in a couple of days. I have to talk to someone directly that I was sharing with a colleague that I didn't think things were working from a work standpoint. And now I need to have a conversation with the guy I'm working with about that the relationship may not be the right thing, because right now there's some financial obligations to it with my medical condition situation. I have huge medical bills that is just eating up a huge chunk of my monthly income that I don't know I can afford to stay associated with this individual now. So, that a lot of stuff is going on, but it is hard to get out of your head, and with women. I was just thinking as you're talking about how you get involved with that, and how have I been involved with women in the past? And I think a lot of it is around different types of organizations, whether it's this 12-step organization,
Mhm.
whether it's the men's group, the many new warriors, the women, circle that they do. I've done it at churches where I got involved in some of the um, meditation and things like that in terms of the chakras, more the Middle East. There's a
Mhm.
guy, there was a mystic that's in India, and he also um, so there was a group that got in there, and getting together and having those type of structured experience of meditation, studying something, having some type of common topic that is around, healing, recovery, humanity. Again, I find that, something that's associated with personal growth, whether it's personal growth, emotional, mental, emotional, even financial growth. If you go to your church puts on something like, how to become rich, or, how, financial management, and because everything has such a spiritual angle to it, right? And it's like when you're in discord and dysfunction shows up in so many different ways in our life. And, so this anything that I find that has had that kind of structure is some of the best ways to connect with women, because there is that commonality of you're there for a common purpose. And in those environments usually are a lot more open, and a lot of the goals are to have, spiritual experiences, or emotional, or all of the above kind of experiences.
Mhm.
now. It's all right. I'm switching devices again.
Oh, okay. Um,
I'm going to exit here and I'll go on the phone and then I'll just.
oh, we lost them. That's what happens when you eat chocolate bars in front of us.
Ah, okay. A different personality.
Yeah.
Here it comes back.
Yep. Yep. There he is.
Now you're on the phone.
Yeah.
Yep, back on the phone again. Um, Something I'll share, like when we're looking at going from head to our feelings, way I often find it, and I'll do with people because I lead people through this quite frequently, is I'll ask people, are you breathing? And most people will start giving me an analytical answer. And I'll do things, and I usually really annoy people when I do this. Okay, well, that's a great theory. And, well, okay, that's an interesting belief, depending on whether it's theory, belief, but it's brain activity. I don't say that. I just go, that's an interesting theory. And they might say something else. I said, oh, that's another interesting theory. But how do you know you're breathing? Because to actually know, you have to be in the experience. Everything else is just a belief or a theory. Once I exhaust the person's words and brain activity, they'll get to a point where they, well, I feel it. And at that moment, they're outside their brain and they're in the moment. They're in their feelings. And then I'll say, how does it feel? You'll see they'll drop into it and say, oh, how does it feel? They'll go in, they'll explore, they'll inwardly inquire. And at that moment, they're totally in their feelings. And I'll just get them to go deeper and deeper into it. So what I've done is I've exhausted their mental capacity to the point there's no answer they can give from there that works. And they explore what else is there. And that's when they'll come across their feelings and they'll drop into it. Women will usually go into their feelings a lot quicker than guys will. Guys,
oh yeah,
they love kicking and bucking with this one.
It's how we were trained.
Yeah, but it's a meditation technique. I'm just taking away, they don't tell you this in meditation. They just get you to watch the breath and wait till you find it, which may be 10 years later. But I just sort of short circuit the process. I've learned this is what happens. So I tap people into it. So for me, it's not that hard to go from the head to the feelings when we have a tool or a system that works. But what we're learning to do is use it on call. It's like holding a hand under a running tap of water, just feeling the feels of the water running over our hand, or feeling the wind blowing on our face, feeling the sun on our hand, anything that puts us in touch with our feelings, which we can then immerse ourselves in, gives us access to, literally that world, that reference point, which is the feeling world.
Well, I have a question. I'm a little bit confused with this whole conversation. So what's the context here that we're doing this type of getting into the feelings and conversation and stuff like that? Because I'm just trying to understand, is this some type of group that you're working together for meditation or personal growth? Are you a coach? Are you a therapist? Because I just find this, I've never ever would ever think about having an interaction with another person that I'm dealing with in this way. It would be, I don't know, maybe I'm just a little bit more just intuitive. I mean, I have been measured as being an Atlas empath, so I just naturally have a grasp for intuition, and then it's on the 99th percentile. And so I just have it more, if that's feeling or what is it, but I'm having a difficult time following what you're saying because I have no idea about the context. Because if I would never, if I'm meeting someone in a social situation, I would never go through the type of thought process you're going through right now. I would just talk to the person and find out, what we have in common and what's the context, and that's what I'm saying. What is the context for this type of thing that you're describing?
All the examples you gave as a possible context, I'm going to say yes to. I will also do it in a social setting. Most people who get used to me, if they do, find that I have a habit of, I look for people being real. And to be real to me, you've got to have that sense of feelings. If you're just coming from thought and theory, I lose interest very quickly because it's just what I call verbiage. Our brain has, how would I put it?
it'll come up with one belief, one theory, one thought after another. It's the monkey mind that continually chatters away. And the brain has this habit, it speaks first, loudest, and most often. So I look for people or conversations where we step out of that monkey mind into being present. Now, it's just the way I work. People who know me know that's the way I have a habit of doing things. And most people, the perception that I've had shared with me is I'm very real and very in touch with a reasonable range of things. I don't do superficial surface conversation. It's of very little interest to me. So, yeah, when people come and have a conversation with me, I'll get them real very quickly. That is one of the tools that I'll use to do that. But when people get real, I usually find they start getting interested because there's a genuineness goes on. And in that genuineness, they're interested in exploring, whether it's exploring me, what I do, why I do it, or exploring themselves. Because usually in a conversation, somebody will mention something somewhere that they're looking for an answer or there's a query. So if I do what I do to help them go into what is an answer or a solution to that query, I'll tap them into themselves in their intuitive side where the answers always lie within. So I also use it for that. So, yeah, an answer to your
It's
question.
fascinating having this conversation just to see how we're all different, right? Because this, what you're talking about, Chris, doesn't occur to me at all. And
No, it doesn't
it's
occur to most
that,
people.
and I don't think that I'm also inauthentic when I talk to people. I'm just straightforward. I'm honest and share and all that. But anyway, but it's just interesting that how people, how different we are to approach these same situation, right? Or situations like, and how our minds work differently, right?
Yeah.
And that's the fast and what we have to be careful about is that I don't fall into my way of doing things is better than your way of doing things, because then I'm not being authentic to myself and who I am as a person, and I'm not respecting the other person either in terms of the way they're, what works for them and how they filter and navigate the world of life.
Yeah. Often what I find I'll do before I sort of do anything, I'll say, would you like to find the answer to that? Or would you be interested in doing something that may help? So I ask, I get permission, and then I'll act on whatever way that permission goes, whether they go yes or no. If people go no, I just usually don't say anything. I stop because, if it's just a conversation going round in circles, I just don't go anywhere with it. But yeah, I'm a bit of a different individual.
I could say that, Chris. I would absolutely agree with you 110%. And you are a different
Yeah.
individual.
Yeah, and a lot of it, would it be of interest to you to share how I got that way?
Sure, it's quick.
Okay,
Hey,
back in
Chris,
90, yeah,
before you start though, we only have about 8 minutes, so make it a shorter version.
okay. I have a range of disabilities which have laid me up for long periods of time. So the short story is to stop going out of my tree, I learned to go within myself. Now, in the background of this, I now have 21 different forms of meditation that I've learned over the years, which has also helped me with this process. So I'm dealing with large amounts of pain on a constant, ongoing basis, as well as disability, mobility issues. The pain is such that I can and do go unconscious with it periodically. So, yeah, I've learnt to go within myself to learn to handle and manage what's going on. That's the
Thank
short
you
story.
for sharing that. Thanks for sharing that with me, because I'm going
What was
to
that?
cut myself out this because of my own health issues here come up. It's too much. That I don't have a lot of mobility like I used to, and I'm, don't get a chance to get outside and do a lot of activities that I used to. So a lot of isolation and having to spend time with yourself. And that's one of the difficult pieces about, having a disability.
Yeah. And that's a big thing. Learning to spend time with ourselves is crucial, because if we don't, how can we have a genuine conversation unless we are present? And to listen to our feelings and instinct, there has to be an I that is present. And if there is no I present, then nothing flows from there. Talking stick in the middle.
All right, Jim, you want to wrap this thing up, put a bow on it tonight?
I think so. Yeah, it's interesting because I have mobility issues now too, as my arthritis it worsens at times. And I also spend time by myself and I need it. That's a good place because the other masculine feminine thing that's really important, and we didn't touch it tonight, but we'll in another program, is our own internal masculine and feminine. We really have to get in touch with both inside of ourselves and get a feel for what our balance is. Because how can you talk to somebody else, male or female, if you don't feel like you're in balance with your masculine and feminine side? And our training, both as women and men for generations, has been to make us a certain way, and that's not natural. That's an imposed thing. The men are big and strong. We never cry. We never show emotion. Blah blah blah. The women should just stay home and be quiet because they're too emotional to do anything else. It's those type of stereotypes that have made a lot of the mess, I think, and that starts inside of us. Definitely. I remember when I was a kid, all the things my uh, parents and my grandparents would, okay, now you have to do this because you're the boy. And even you're the older boy, which I mean, so it's a challenge. It's one of the toughest challenges I think there is, this balancing thing. Hey, this was great, guys. How about last comments from either or both?
Pleasure to meet you both, especially you, Mark.
Yeah,
I don't know if we've met before, but appreciate what you've added, and yeah, just touching base with you. Thank you.
no problem, and I appreciate it. And I'm sorry about my computer. I have to figure out what's going on with it. Uh, but anyway, I definitely just, needed to kind of be a part of the group, or something like this. And
Mm.
I mean, there's a big resistance to this for me to do this, but you know, um, I think I'm more in. There was a period of time where I did, the feelings and the emotions and really deep into it, probably for a good solid 15 or 20 years. And after doing that, I just finally got exhausted with that type of intensity and everything. And I've just cut it back off and just really try to live a normal life. And I know what behavior that I exercise, what I end up feeling bad or the consequences. And I try to keep out of my head and the analytical part of, my emotions and my feelings. So that's also just analyzing, that's seeing your head was especially at the same time. So, a lot of what's been working for me as I'm older is just being practical about what I need to get done on a daily basis, and what's just. I don't really think I have too many issues with having the authentic. Well, I didn't. That's the first thing. Being your authentic self is to be honest and straightforward, and so it is to question the answer. Um, so anyway, but I enjoyed being part of the group tonight. It's helping me out because I just mentally it's been a little bit rough for the last 3 or 4 weeks since got out of the hospital and having to make all these really big changes. They're uncomfortable as hell, particularly the food and being on such a restricted
Mhm.
plan. So anyway, thanks. That is it for me.
Sounds good. Yeah, and I'm glad you showed up, Mark, especially if it is difficult to show up. And that's a big part of the thing with the men. So we're going to get more and more men around these circles. Usually we have a few more than this, but it's okay. Apparently we three were meant to be here and talk tonight. And we opened some doors. We'll carry it into bigger discussions. Thank you both. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. You're looking good. You look like a camera. Oh, I'm sorry. And uh, Chris, you're always amazing. You always can go right to the heart of things. Appreciate that, brother.
You're welcome.
Right.
Much
still-
appreciated, brother. Catch
See-
us.
Okay. See you all the next time.
All right, take care.